Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. Starting your week off right. The new week, fresh week, the right way, the only way.
Yes.
The Joey way. Dominic Salee,
I like
you
that.
do not have Joey anywhere in your name, but you are one and the same. How are you?
Man, I'm doing good. I really like the Joey way that you kind of mentioned there. I like that. But doing good, man. It was a good weekend. Great fights for Bellator. Great fights for UFC. We had our regional showcase we're going to talk about. It was a great weekend. Kind of a chilled out, relaxed weekend after I got done with work and whatnot. So we're here today in the studio. We're going to talk some fights for the next little while. Join us. Happy Monday. Noah, how was your weekend?
My weekend was great. I had a nice little initiation, the last initiation that I will be a bystander for with my business fraternity. Even though I went in alumni status, I guess is what I'll just call it for transparency. I went alumni status for this semester, so I'm not really even part of it. Technically, it's a lifelong membership. You fraternities,
it's a whole thing.
You fraternity sorority people get what I'm talking about. But I got to take part in the festivities. I guess I'll put it that way. And it was nice. It was I sat on a couch and didn't move for hours and watched football. So I was
good deal.
I considered myself pretty pleased. But of course, I did that after the fights, and it was really nice to have. Friday there was a lot of stuff grabbing my attention. Bellator, actually Combate I was watching, so we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. And then, so it was kind of Friday set up. I had the TV going with Bellator and my laptop going with Combate, so I had the dual wielding broadcast going on. And then Saturday, obviously being able to watch the UFC event pretty early was nice. Got done around like 6:30, which shout out to all the finishes on that card to make that possible.
Yeah.
And tied a record, by the way. Eight knockouts on the card, tied the record.
Woo.
And yeah, I was able to just go straight from there to, toss a few back with the boys, with
your
the
festivities.
Girls. Yeah, of course. So definitely a weekend that was every proportion was done well. I got the right amount of fights, the right amount of beer, the right amount of football, and now I'm going to end it with the right amount of podcasting.
That's right.
Fight announcements. Whew. A fight that I'm excited to hear has been rebooked is that of Augusto Sakai taking on Tuivasa. For, I guess, background on this one, this was supposed to be coming up this Saturday.
That's true.
However, it was on the prelims of it, I guess, and maybe on main card, but still, it was like this fight was kind of being just pushed into a place that made it kind of irrelevant, even though I was still excited for it. But man, with the excitement and energy that Tuivasa brings, UFC smartens up. He gets moved, along with Augusto Sakai, to his credit, to UFC 269 as if they fucking needed it. December 11th, we get top 10 heavyweight in Sakai looking to hold his ground against the surging, the shoey god that is Tuivasa. Dominic, what do you think?
I mean, hey, we talked about it on Friday, how this fight got scrapped, and here we are on Monday saying it got rebooked. I'm happy. Again, I kind of just reiterate what I said Friday. For Sakai, can he bounce back, right? And for Tuivasa, bam, can he smash his way back in to the rankings and potentially a top 10 ranking? Can't wait.
Mm-hmm. Following that, a week later on December 18th, a very fun fight that was added to this card, and that's Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's still top 5 in this welterweight division. Don't sleep. I get it. He might not be fighting Usman anytime soon, but the guy is still one of the most consistent products of this welterweight division. And he goes up against Belal Muhammad, a newcomer to this top 10. He found his way here after a interesting fight. That's my way of saying boring fight with Damian Maia, who obviously, Damian was well past his prime, but still just an absolute buzzsaw when it comes to his jiu-jitsu, and so slippery, so opportunistic that, you almost have to fight a very cautious fight with him. So no disrespect to Belal there. However, it's a big opportunity for Belal Muhammad because truthfully, he has always came off to me like a guy who is good everywhere, very competent everywhere. He's got good stand-up. He's got good wrestling. He's got I don't know about maybe his full game, but it appears he's very good if he's standing, if he's on the ground,
right?
If he's in a clinch. He really can hold his own. But I've yet to see him truly excel anywhere. He's got his moments. He's got his finished victories, but it's just I've yet to see him really. What's the when the going gets tough? What's kind of the skill that Belal Muhammad, hangs his hat on and says this is going to be my way to a victory? Which is always, for some reason, I put a lot of emphasis on that in my fighters. They can be very well rounded. Obviously, that's almost preferable, but sometimes when all your skills start to diminish, when you're getting pieced up on the feet, or if your legs are getting butchered by leg kicks, or if you're getting wrestle fucked for the majority of a fight, what can you bring that you can depend on at the end of the day to get you through? Yeah. I've just yet to see that with Belal, but we know what Stephen Thompson's going to try to do here. And I doubt Belal will want to stand with him, but I'm curious, Dominic, does he possess the wrestling and even the submission skills to be a threat?
See, that's a good question because, again, we haven't really seen it. And I think this is, on paper, a very tough matchup for Belal, and it's one that I'm sure he will rise to the occasion. I'm sure he's going to do whatever he can to get the victory. This will be potentially his chance to crack into top 5 here. But being that Wonderboy has that elite karate stance that we still don't see too often, even in 2021's MMA world, it's such a specialized skill set that Belal is going to have to try and solve that puzzle. If he can, my hat's off to him. That is going to be, I think it's going to be a fun fight. I do.
It's very interesting that Belal Muhammad could go from, I don't know if he was ranked before the Maya fight, but if he was, right on the, just sneaking in, and he could go from that to top 5 contender before our eyes. And, that's going to be kind of similar to Beneil Dariush's rise in a lot of ways, where
for sure
most of the community is not going to value him that highly. But we need to start recognizing the reality of the situation is Belal Muhammad not as far from contendership as we once thought. And I'm actually going to give some credit to Joe Rogan, who acknowledged that on the broadcast for UFC 268. And he kind of got clowned for it. I don't know if you saw that. After the fights were over and, they're still talking before the broadcast wraps up, they were talking about the welterweight division and kind of, just mentioning some of the contenders that Usman will still potentially have to face moving forward. And they mentioned, the big hitters. I'm sure Hamzat got mentioned. Obviously Colby that just fought. And then you have like Burns. They might have mentioned, I don't even know if like Wonderboy got mentioned, but who might have, Leon Edwards,
yeah.
And then Joe Rogan, like after it was kind of done, he goes, well, don't forget about Belal Muhammad neither. He's still a factor in this.
Yeah.
And everybody, and I will say, when I first heard it, I was like, huh?
I
was like, okay, didn't really expect that. But if he wins on December 18th, it's definitely going to look a lot better.
He's there. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of if he can put it all together and show a lot of improvement, I guess, from what we've seen of him so far, but not going to be easy against Stephen Thompson. That's for sure.
For sure.
Let's talk about these lightweights, Dominic, because they just can't get along.
No.
So here's our players in this the story of the week. And might I just add that, for all the being on Twitter is a gift. It's the gift that keeps on giving, because as much as I get annoyed with Twitter and how toxic it can be at times, weeks like this week where I got this kind of content from these lightweights make it all worth it. Yeah. This was some of the best comedy of the week. So who are our major players here, our big hitters? Well, former lightweight champion and potential GOAT, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev.
I don't know. Protege.
I've been calling him Makhachev, but I'm wondering if I need to start calling him Islam Makhachev. Be more proper with it. That is the protege of one Khabib. Justin Gaethje, who just obviously had that fight of the year victory over Michael Chandler. Eddie Alvarez, current lightweight over for ONE FC, but former UFC lightweight champion. And weirdly enough, Tony Ferguson, who's still
he's always there hanging around like the boogeyman he is.
I love it. I'm telling you guys, this has been my favorite part of this week has been following this drama on Twitter. And where does this drama all stem from? Well, let's focus on the two main parties here, and that's Islam Makhachev and Justin Gaethje, who in back-to-back weeks, UFC 267 and UFC 268, got to really, I guess, put their showcase on for the brass and say, this is why I deserve a title shot. Islam got a very quick, thorough submission victory over Dan Hooker, while Justin Gaethje, like I mentioned, had potentially the fight of the year with Michael Chandler, absolute war, but a fight that he clearly won and only got better as the fight went on for him, I would say.
Yeah.
So the debate online has been following that, and it's not just with these guys that are mentioned. It's really the whole community has gotten involved, where who should get the title shot next? Is it Justin Gaethje? Is it Islam Makhachev? It seems like everybody's in one of two camps. So where everybody else gets involved was Khabib has been tweeting a lot about his reasoning for thinking Islam should get the title shot. And obviously he's a little biased, but his big reasoning is the win streak. Islam's on a 9-fight win streak, all in the UFC, and has looked pretty dominant in all of them. He has the win even before Hooker over Thiago Moises, who's still very talented, even though he did lose on Saturday, but still very good lightweight. But 9-fight win streak nonetheless, and that is very impressive. However, the argument that I guess the guy that's been in Gaethje's corner, Eddie Alvarez, was making is that if you look at the body of work, at the resume, even though Gaethje had, which this is another point Khabib made, before this win over Chandler, Gaethje's last fight was a year ago in a title fight with Khabib where he got put to sleep with the choke. So before that, basically, or Justin Gaethje's record in the UFC is 6-3.
Yeah. Which
is not as clean as Islam's. I know Islam does have a loss in the UFC. I don't know if he's 9-1 or 10-1 or overall, but overall his record looks nicer than Justin Gaethje's. But Eddie Alvarez's point was that he would rather be 6-3 if you look at the resume that Gaethje has put together, the former champions he has beaten and competed with, including Eddie Alvarez himself, who does have a win over Gaethje. He has fought with Dustin Poirier. So his whole point was like, this guy's been fighting literally, like you mentioned off recording, he's yet to face an unranked fighter in the UFC.
Exactly.
It's been all rankings all the way through, even early on with like a Michael Johnson, who we know how good he can be any given night.
Yep.
So, Dominic, my point here, and Tony Ferguson's kind of just thrown in here, but he's been going after Khabib. The animated video is, I'm telling you guys, you have to find this. It is my favorite video I've ever seen in my life. Regardless, Dominic, really none of this is all that important. What's important is the discussion at hand, the debate at hand.
Yeah.
We both have said that we think Justin Gaethje should get the next shot. So I'm not going to ask you where you fall on the Islam versus Gaethje debate, but there's a debate behind the debate. That's right. Pulled the curtains out from under you guys. All right. I pulled the rug out from under you. I pulled the curtains back,
Yeah.
Because this is debateception, basically. There's a debate behind the debate behind the debate. So the debate is
my brain is
about that of a resume.
Yeah.
And Dominic, I want you to give your thoughts on this debate. I don't want to really point you in any direction. You got the win streak, you got the body of work. Where do you kind of fall in this?
Yeah, I was gung-ho on Islam Makhachev getting that next title fight. Then he destroyed Dan Hooker, and I was like, okay, definitely. But then Gaethje had the fight with Chandler, and I'm like, okay, wait, yeah, it probably should be Gaethje next. But then we break down these resumes, right? And Islam does have the super long win streak, which is good. He's got Drew Dober, Thiago Moises, Dan Hooker, right? Those are the three capstone ones. But then you look at Gaethje, and it's like, yeah, he did lose a year ago to Khabib, but what did it take to lose that fight? Well, he became the interim champion of the world. Since then, he beat Michael Chandler in a 3-round war. Tony Ferguson. He's been in there with Dustin Poirier. He's been in there with Eddie Alvarez, who's in his corner, backing him to get a title fight. James Vick, who at the time was good. I don't want to get too much into that career. Tony Ferguson
Justin Gaethje
himself
was the underdog in that James Vick fight,
yes.
just to be clear.
Yeah. So the resumes are not even really close at this point. And, Gaethje has earned it. They both have earned it, right? But it's just a matter of it's time for Gaethje to get in there again, considering he was an interim champ too, helps his status as well. And for Islam still, right? It's one top 5 win at the end of the day that he has. And so now he's in there, one more, and I think he is right there. But when you look at those resumes, really deep dive into them, they're not too comparable. Outside of one is just on a streak. So
yeah. So overall, you emphasize more the level of opponents, the body of work, over just having the extended run of wins. As impressive as that is, you prefer the body of work, correct?
Right.
Yeah, and it seems like this mindset that Khabib and Islam and others have taken, the emphasis on the win streak. This is a mindset that's been around in combat sports for a long time. It's very prevalent in boxing. As much as I love high-level boxing, I've always hated that kind of, once a guy loses that perfect record, it's like his career's kind of done a lot of times.
Yeah.
Your guy goes undefeated for so many years, and the bigger problem is because that's such a sticking point in the sport of boxing, that early years of these guys' careers are spent fighting guys that are well below their caliber. So, they don't, once they get to like their 30-0 or something, then they start fighting actual competition. And it's just like, I don't know. It's a little disappointing when a sport's kind of built like that. Because for guys like us, we like to dig deep into these sports. We don't just like to watch the big fights. We like to watch a lot of these smaller shows. Well, it's hard for me to invest that much time into boxing outside of the big cards when you go to lower level boxing, it's a lot of mismatches, truthfully. And I'm sure there might be some boxing purists or people more involved in that world than me that can, correct me if they think I'm wrong on that. But that's where just this mentality stems from. It's always been a part of combat sports, but for some reason, MMA has seemed to have avoided that for the most part.
Yeah.
We for the most part over the course of MMA history, guys in their legacies, they've never really been dependent on, how few amount of losses they had.
Yeah.
It was more about the wins, the achievements. And that's the way it should be. Who did you beat? Not just about making that record as clean as possible. I mean, that helps. Khabib is considered in the GOAT conversation, and the majority of that is because he retired undefeated at 29-0. If you really look at his resume, it's great. He had a nice reign as the lightweight champion, but not the extended run of guys like George St. Pierre, like Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, Amanda Nunes, stuff like that. So all in all, I see where the mindset's at, and I'm not going to be upset if Islam Makhachev gets that title shot. It just seems that the UFC preferred the Gaethje matchup.
Yeah.
Dana White said it made sense because he is ranked number 2. So why not fight the winner of Oliveira Poirier? And, this isn't a direction I thought I was going to go with this question, but I might actually present it. Justin Gaethje, in an interview, mentioned that he's not even so sure that if Dustin Poirier wins the title, that he would be the guy that would not be the matchup for him. Basically saying he thinks Poirier might walk away from the sport, which has been a talking point for a while now. We've been kind of unsure of Dustin Poirier's long-term future in MMA. So is there a chance that everybody goes through all this and gets so angry at one another, and then it turns out that we just get Justin Gaethje versus Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title anyways?
Right. I mean, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. We've seen now, obviously, Charles Oliveira is like, hey, guys, don't forget about me. It's like, okay, yes. If he beats Dustin Poirier, I have no doubt that Charles is going to keep fighting. So then you have him and Gaethje, which is that's a matchup right there. But then, like you said, with Dustin Poirier, he's kind of hinted that winning that undisputed title is the last thing he's got to check off his list. He's done it all. Been the interim champ, been on the win streaks, has the finishes, has the resume to back it up, and he just needs that one more thing. So is he going to stay and defend that belt? I don't know. It is kind of a gray area. Justin Gaethje seems to believe he will not, and he thinks, I don't think Dustin wants to be back in there with me again anyway because of that dog fight they had. Went 4 rounds back in 2018 when they fought each other. Amazing fight. So, either way, there's always going to be drama in this division, and it rightfully so because they're all so amazingly talented. But to your point, yeah, if Dustin were to beat Oliveira and then walk away, we have a belt up for grabs. Well, you think Justin Gaethje is definitely one of the two to fill in, but then do they do just Oliveira again, or does Islam enter himself in that conversation, and then those two just get to fight each other? Gaethje's given his thoughts on a fight with Islam, saying, I don't know if he's ready for the dog in me. He's never faced anyone like me. And that's just Gaethje's mentality, man. So this division is just so unbelievably stacked and talented, from champion all the way to number 15 and beyond. So all these guys up at the top fighting one another. That competitive fire is burning, Noah, and it's not going out anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, if the UFC didn't do it for Justin Gaethje when they had the belt up for grabs in UFC 262, and they instead went with Oliveira versus Chandler, there ain't no way they're going to do it for Charles Oliveira if he were to lose to Poirier. I love Charles Oliveira. I think that guy is being highly underrated in this matchup.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that if he loses, he'll have to go and win a couple or win one or whatever and earn his shot back.
Yeah.
But, let's move on to our regional showcase.
This is what I've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm. And this week, we went to quite a cold place. Anchorage, Alaska, to be frank. That's right. And that was for Alaska Fighting Championship 161. High demand for this one, Dominic. We had highly requested for this program. And now we know why. So let's explain. I want you to, off the top, as I'm one to ask you every week, give the viewers and myself your thoughts on Alaska Fighting Championship. But more importantly, what fight, or what about this presentation stuck out to you most?
Okay, so the show itself first. We've done 2 other regional showcases thus far on the program, on the show, being UAE Warriors 24 out in Abu Dhabi. Fantastic production, amazing fights, amazing quality of commentary. Everything was great. We went to LFA 117. Obviously, that's one of the biggest players there is in regional MMA. I didn't expect anything less. It was a fantastic show. Production, everything was top tier. Alaska Fighting Championship, baby. We're and I'm not saying any of this to be negative, because at the end of the day, this kind of league here with AFC is what I think a lot of these really small, just trying to get it out of the mud type promotions for MMA look like, is what I saw here with Alaska Fighting Championship. They're in, kind of a ballroom. They've got 30, 40 tables, just circle tables that people are sitting around. Very small, compact. The production, not the highest quality. The commentary, not the best. The announcer, the microphones were a bit scratchy and loud. But at the end of the day, these people got to start somewhere, right? Whether that is the commentary, the ring announcer, the fighters themselves, they got to start somewhere. And that's where deep down I really did appreciate this show. And then in terms of watching these fights, one of the funniest things, and this is kind of towards the production side, it made it interesting. There were only 3 fights on the card, first off, so it's definitely worth your time. It's like, 58 minutes long, the show? Mm-hmm. And for each fight, they kept me on my toes because I never knew how much time was left in the round. I never knew how much time was left in the fight because the clock on the screen was never correct, and it never matched what the commentary was saying, and the commentary never matched what the ref was doing when he was separating people. So that was just something, a little funny detail that I couldn't help but bring up here. But the fights, definitely the lowest quality we've seen, right, so far through the regional showcases. Funny enough, the guy that I had the most excitement for was Ernesto Zarate. He comes out in the main event. It was ended in 58 seconds. But for the first 20, 30 seconds, I'm like, this guy kind of looks like he just had more to offer, is what it looked like when he started. I'm like, okay, I'm excited to see what this guy looks like. He gets absolutely pummeled and body slammed by Dominic. what was it? Merriweather,
Mhm.
and then gets the submission win in 58 seconds. So all the fights were a bit odd, a bit weird, wacky. But at the end of the day, man, I really did appreciate the show, and I'm glad we chose to showcase it here on today's episode.
Well, it's going to be hard to follow that because you took every talking point. But
sorry.
Dominic Merriweather was an impressive victory. I will say he felt like that main event felt like a level above kind of the other two fights we got.
Yeah.
But in terms of presentation, this wasn't like high level. It was a bit of a shock to the nervous system at first.
Yes.
It was a culture shock. Like I turned it on, and again, full disclosure, I knew nothing about Alaska Fighting Championship going in. I obviously had mentioned that it was featured on Dana White Looking for a Fight, but that was in an arena.
Yeah.
So it's very clear that AFC, they're kind of a mom and pop shop for MMA. That's what I keep calling them. They're like a family run business. So I have a lot of respect for what they're doing. They produced actual high caliber MMA athletes, Jared Cannonier being one of them. And, that main event I thought was a decent prospect fight. I don't know how far Dominic Merriweather or Ernesto Zarate are going to go. Merriweather being the one I got the win, we'll mention him specifically. But I was very impressed with his performance. Now, if there's a talking point that I can claim to be my own, that would be the stigma that has surrounded MMA for such a long time, and for good reason, is the legend of a lot of MMA fighters' tattoos, and specifically how bad a lot of tattoos are for MMA fighters. I still remember the first time I saw the Johnny Cash tattoo on Alan Belcher's arm. What a day that was. John Martin, though, our winner of our opening bout, he did get a submission victory over Devin Paulson, so shout out to him. These were some interesting tattoos. Dare I say, very artistic.
To say the least.
Yeah. So shout out to him because he looked. How did you describe him? You said he looked more like Andre Petrosky than Andre Petrosky did.
Yeah.
Which was a very funny note because I didn't really pick that up when I first watched it, but yeah, it was what it was. I highly recommend it though for anybody. I just don't recommend. I personally couldn't get the commentary was, like I listened to it on mute basically the whole time because I tried to watch it on my TV, but the volume would with the microphones was getting very distorted at times, and I would turn it up, and then all of a sudden it'd get really loud, and so I just turned off the commentary and volume, so I didn't really have that for most of it. You said there was at one point where the commentary team decided to take the fight off, and then they just said it was just silence the rest of the time.
Apparently, to their credit, they said the microphone just got messed up, so they couldn't talk. But I didn't know that at first, so I'm like, what are we doing? We're just not discussing this fight, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah. But I was very surprised to see like something like this on Fight Pass. This is something that I feel like I would watch on like YouTube. If I'm being honest. Like back when I used to be big into professional wrestling and YouTube was kind of still on making its wave, in the late 2000s, I guess. I would watch backyard wrestling on YouTube, and it was very low quality. But the guys there was a lot of heart behind it. Sometimes. Yeah. But it was awful fighting and everything. But you couldn't help but like want to support it. And this kind of reminded me of something like that. It's still not like I wouldn't call like I wouldn't call the fighting necessarily low quality. The first two fights weren't anything to really write home about, but that main event was definitely, worth the time. Just got to put respect for the hustle, the heart behind this operation. You can just sense it. And I don't know. I'm curious if people want to let us know kind of more about the history of this promotion. I'd be interested in knowing. And I know I can go back on Fight Pass and watch this, so maybe I should just not be lazy and do that. If this has been more of a COVID response, that they had a show over the summer where it looked like they were kind of like almost in a backyard of sorts. But from what I understand, they've been in arenas, for a while. I was on looking for a fight. So has this just been kind of a COVID thing that they've kind of been forced to scale down, or have they always been kind of known to do stuff like this? I'd be interested in knowing about that. But all in all, great time. And I actually don't have our next show in front of me, but I'm pretty sure if you join us next Sunday, we will be talking about, I believe it is Cage Fury.
I think they do have a show next week.
Yeah. I have it pulled up here. Cage Fury FC 103.
Okay.
It's happening Friday, November 19th, 9 p.m. start time. I'm excited to go over that one. That one should probably take us back into the quality that we had come to expect up to this point.
Right.
So looking forward to that one. Let's move on to Bellator 271. And our main event was for the Bellator women's featherweight title. Cris Cyborg once again comes out on top with the knockout victory in the first round over Sinead Kavanaugh, a minute 32 seconds in. Dominic, based off what we saw, we didn't see a lot.
Nope.
What were your thoughts on the fight? Were you any thoughts on Sinead Kavanaugh's performance, her strategy, I guess, going in here? And, what might be next for that of Cris Cyborg?
I mean, for Kavanaugh, we kind of talked about it on Friday. It's like, what is her strategy? Cyborg's seen it all. What are you going to do to present anything different? And obviously, if you're standing with Cyborg, good luck, because it doesn't really go well for many people unless you're Amanda Nunes. So Cyborg does what Cyborg does best here, gets a brutal knockout at that. What was it, a minute and a half into round one? Made it look easy. That's her second title defense of 2021, her third overall. She's 4-0 in Bellator. She's an amazing fighter. She's a pioneer of women's MMA. What can come next, Noah? Well, there was someone sitting front row Friday night at Bellator 271. Goes by the name of Kayla Harrison. I don't know. I guess she's some sort of undefeated.
Get to the point. My God.
So Kayla Harrison was there, obviously two-time PFL champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist, sitting front row. The week before, she was at UFC 268 in New York, for what it's worth, just saying. So she's kind of doing her rounds, right? You're testing that free agency. Scott Coker had spoke with her over the weekend. Also had some interviews post-fight saying, I definitely want to try and pursue her, and he wants to pursue it hard. He wants to make this fight between Kayla Harrison and Cris Cyborg, along with other women in the division for Kayla, as he kind of stated in that quote. And Kayla's interested, right? She wants to become the best in the world. She realizes that to do that, she's got to beat people like Cyborg, and mention how she's a trailblazer, and the most respect that she can give Cyborg is saying, I want to step in there and fight you. Cyborg is more than welcoming to that challenge. She's made it clear. She said, if Kayla signs, we'll make the fight. It's that simple. But for now, I'm not going to waste my shine for Kayla. So Cyborg's just going to keep doing her thing over there in Bellator, man. They're going to keep feeding her contenders as long as they can. But I do believe that her and Kayla Harrison is not too far out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I actually want to give a lot of a pat on the back. Let's call it that. I'm going to give a virtual pat on the back to Sinead Kavanaugh, because this was essentially the only way that it's a hard task, right? Because her skill set has always been, she's not exactly a very good grappler, or she doesn't have good jiu-jitsu, but she does have power.
Yeah. But
you're going up against Cris Cyborg. So, she fought the fight that she needed to fight in order to even have a chance to win. But ultimately, it's the hardest fight to win against Cris Cyborg, more than likely. And that's basically what we saw. But I just want to give her credit because she went for it. She didn't fight to not lose. She fought to try to win.
Yeah.
And that's more than I can say for a lot of the these divisions, these women's divisions specifically, that are headed by or have a champion that is so dominant. Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes, now Cris Cyborg, Kayla Harrison with the PFL. So often, because these champions are a level above their competition, I've been getting really annoyed with these title defenses where their challenger, understandably outmatched, but doesn't really try to do anything. And maybe that's a very simplistic way to look at it. Again, I'm not in that cage. I don't know what potentially they're trying to set up, or maybe there's something I'm missing. But I think of like the Lauren Murphy fight. I remember I gave Lauren Murphy a hard time, and I still kind of stand by it. I was just like, you talked yourself up on fight week saying that you didn't feel like an underdog, whatever. And I get it. Like, you're confident going in, but then the fight takes place and I'm like, I don't really see what the game plan was here. I don't really see where you ever thought you were going to be able to really do anything to have an impact on Shevchenko. At least here, I saw where the game plan was. It was to get into a firefight and hopefully catch Cris Cyborg, which has been done. You saw it with Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes basically lured Cyborg into Cyborg's worst fight she's ever fought in her MMA career. Just completely reckless abandon. Even though she landed a couple good shots on Nunes, Nunes, I think, showed a lot of people how good her chin was that night and how much her power had improved in her hands, obviously, to put away Cyborg. Kavanaugh didn't really have that here, but it at least kind of makes me go, you know what? I actually would like to watch Sinead Kavanaugh fight again. I'd like to keep watching her improve, focus on some of those other aspects of MMA, get better, and we'll see what's next for her. She is 35 or 36, so not the youngest of talents here. You already mentioned Kayla Harrison and how that's the fight that will make a lot of sense. I think all signs from this weekend point to Kayla Harrison or Bellator having a lead on the Kayla Harrison sweepstakes.
Yep.
I still think the PFL is a big player in that as well. The UFC, I still think are like not even that interested, and that might even been more amplified by. I don't know if you saw Dana White's post-fight press conference, but they asked him about the future of the women's featherweight division, and he said it depended on what the champion Amanda Nunes wanted to do. Essentially meaning, if she doesn't want to defend the belt anymore, we're probably just going to get rid of the division.
Yeah.
That was the way I took it anyways. So I like the idea of her and Cris Cyborg and Bellator. I'd be curious to see if they signed her, if they would just immediately put her in a title fight, or if she would, fight someone, a contender before, because that's a big jump in competition. I mean, Kayla Harrison's great, Dominic, but she's yet to fight someone.
No one like Cyborg.
Even the top 5 of this Bellator women's featherweight division, I would say, are all, maybe even more than that, are probably better than anybody she's fought up to this point.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know if I would necessarily jump out the gate and put that fight together. Now, do you put yourself at a risk? Because if Kayla Harrison does turn out to be maybe, overrated or not ready for, maybe she loses just for whatever reason. She ends up losing to one of your other contenders. Maybe that fight never comes to fruition and you kind of miss out on a big payday fight-wise.
Yeah.
But I do just want to throw out another name. There is a very familiar name for those of you that have followed the women's divisions from when they first came into the UFC and over to Bellator. Kat Zingano, I think, would be an interesting fight to see next. She's a decent name in terms of these list of competitors, and she's 2-0 in Bellator, coming off a submission win against Olivia Parker back in April. I would just like to see her get a shot. She's not a natural featherweight. She always fought at bantamweight back in the UFC days, but she's 39 years old, doesn't probably have a ton of time left, and I think that 2-0 in this Bellator women's featherweight division, I think that's more than enough considering her name value coming in to earn a title shot against Cris Cyborg. Or I'd like to see her fight Kayla Harrison. I'd like to see one of those two happen for her.
Yeah, another OG of women's MMA. She's never fought Cyborg, at least to my knowledge, which makes it kind of even more fun now that they're in Bellator. So, that would be cool. I forgot about Kat Zingano being over there. Good point.
I know. I happened to look at the rankings, and I just saw her in there. I was like, oh, yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's my bad for not knowing that. But, 2-0 in Bellator, I was actually like, okay, there's something there. She had a kind of laundry list of bad luck and UFC and just, this or that kind of didn't go right for her. Some very terrible personal battles she had to deal with. But it seems like she's in a good place mentally, physically. I'd like to see her get a shot either with Cyborg or Kayla Harrison. A big fight, I would think.
Yeah, I like either one of those.
Now our featured bout of this main card saw Aaron Pico, for the first time in his professional MMA career, go all the way to the judges' scorecards. He ultimately gets the unanimous decision win over Justin Gonzales. Now, as the headline states, how high can he fly? For some reason, this reminds me of the Michael Scott when he's about to. I forget who he's talking to. I think it's David Wallace, and he says he's going to quit. This is right when he starts up the Michael Scott Paper Company, and he's like something about you'll see how high, or you don't know how high I can fly, or something like that. So, in this instance, though, Aaron Pico, this was the most complete performance I've probably seen from him up to this point. He used his all-around game, mixed up his level changes very well, secured some very nice takedowns, but also had some really nice moments on the feet. Obviously, he's trained with some of the best boxers in the world, has been brought in as sparring partners for guys like Miguel Cotto, which just speaks to the quality we're dealing with here potentially. And I think defensively speaking, that's always been kind of where he's fallen short. And here I thought we at least saw improvements. He did get, found himself into some firefights at points in the fight. But overall, this was the most complete performance I've seen from Aaron Pico. And it's enough to where I'm like, okay, Justin Gonzales, very underrated opponent, and was a good test. But now I want to see him fight someone really on his caliber, or at least in that space of top 5 in the featherweight division.
Yeah, I mean, this was the performance that you wanted from him, right? You wanted to see a prolonged rather than just a quick finish, and now it's 5 straight wins for Aaron Pico. He's right there amongst the contenders now in this division. And like you said, he kind of showed that full skill set that we hadn't seen too much, but now you kind of look and you're like, okay, this guy is 9-3 now, 25 years old, and the skill set he has is just, it's very good. And he's a Swiss Army knife. He's good everywhere. He's a threat in this division and a potential star for Bellator.
Is there any fight in mind that you would want to put him up with next?
Ooh, if you're shooting off the hip like that, I can't give you any specific names, but I'm telling you right now, I mean, he's ranked 6th now. Let's really throw him in, right? What's wrong with getting him a top 3 guy in this division? Let's see if he can make it 6 in a row, one more win. If it's convincing, he could be fighting for a title after one more.
Yeah, I like one of these guys that maybe a guy that might be looking to get back on track, like Emmanuel Sanchez, someone who did compete in the Grand Prix, but came up short. Someone who's been battle-tested, who's fought, whether it be Patricio or McKee. They've fought in the best of the best in the division, but have fallen short. I think that would really tell us a lot about, Pico's not just long-term potential, but at this point, short-term, where is he? Because the Gonzalez fight showed us a lot. But now it's time for that next step.
Well, and for what it's worth, Noah, real quick, and maybe this is a discussion again for the future as well, but I'm going to ask it here because this is the performance you wanted to see from him, being that he was such a highly touted prospect when he came in and has literally had his whole professional career with Bellator, right? 9-3 now, all in the Bellator cage. If this kid can rise through these ranks, become a champion, being that he's only 25, could you see him potentially in the UFC in the future?
I feel like you always turn it into about going to the UFC. God damn it. Why can't Bellator just have one or two of these guys? No,
All
okay.
right.
I get what you're saying. The best of the best ultimately usually go to the UFC at some point. It's just interesting because there hasn't been a ton of, at least that I can think of, Dominic, there's not been a ton of that guys that Bellator kind of raised to a certain level, leaving Bellator to go to the UFC. Can you really think of it? Michael Chandler, of course, is like the prime example, but then there was I'm going to blank on his name. There was a guy who was a champion for Bellator, one of their best fighters they had at that point. He came to the UFC in around 2015, 2016, and was a bit of a dud. Went and this is why I'm struggling to remember his name, of course. But basically, yes, Will Brooks.
Will Brooks.
Yes, thank you. He went 1-3 or 1-4 in the UFC. Just had a really bad run. It was kind of weird because he was fighting guys in Bellator who we had assumed were at least somewhat UFC caliber, and yet in the UFC, even when he was fighting guys that we would think were below the competition he had in Bellator, he wasn't winning those either. So those are the two prime examples I can think of. I don't know if I'm missing anybody, but Bellator has really – they're kind of in the precipice of their shift from what we kind of used to mock them for in the past, where they were the promotion that would pick up the scraps, the UFC guys that were past their prime in order to kind of make a quick buck. And then now they're really focused on building up their farm system, building up these prospects and building their own talent. Sure, they'll still sign guys like Corey Anderson, like Ryan Bader, Sergio Pettis, but in a lot of ways, these guys are kind of doing more. It's not just for example, all those three names I just mentioned are guys that were not washed up. They weren't past their prime when they came to Bellator, and they've gone on to do great things, and for a few of them might continue to even go even further.
Right.
But it's interesting that that's not the it's a fair question about Aaron Pico that you're saying. I know I kind of gave you shit there, but that was a joke because it's the second time I've heard it with AJ McKee. That was a question brought up about him as well. I don't know if you brought it up, but I've heard that question. And it's kind of interesting that now we're going to really kind of see how these fighters, anyway, value Bellator as a promotion. Are they really are they just another farm system, or are they really not, I don't know if legit competition, or just they are a legit alternative?
Yeah.
And as much as I want to, I love the idea of competition, in a way. I also love the idea of seeing the best of the best fight the best of the best, and these fantasy bookings for AJ McKee against Volkanovski and Max Holloway are just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
But part of me does want to see these guys stick around in Bellator and try to really build something there. It's just Bellator is just going to need to continue to take these chances on some of these guys, with Aaron Pico, who I don't know if you really took a chance on. The guy showed so much promise. You had some hiccups along the way, but if you continue to take these chances on these guys who've never fought professionally, that's really your way to try to beat the UFC to the punch, because the UFC is going to be fighting a lot of these guys on the regional scene at the same time that you are.
Right.
And who's going to win that battle, most of the time. But if the money's there, if the money's right, I'd like to see Pico and AJ McKee stick with Bellator. But if Aaron Pico, for whatever reason, came to the UFC, it would be interesting to see. He has just he's so well-rounded, and it's just the defense that tends to lack for him.
Yeah.
But you look at Max Holloway, who we're about to talk about in a second, that's always been his Achilles heel, or whatever you want to call it. That's always been the least focused part of his game is his defense. And look how far that's carried him.
Yeah, pretty far.
If you're able to do what you do well enough offensively, then you might not get touched, or you just might not get hurt. And Pico can't take the punch that a Max Holloway can, but I do think that this guy's ceiling is very high, and even if he were to be brought into the UFC where the competition's at a higher level, I still think that ceiling is just as high.
Yeah. Had to get your thoughts.
Yeah. Did you have any opinion otherwise? Or
no? I mean, you know how I am with some of these Bellator people, and I just love the fact that he's only 25, man. So I look at it as he's got plenty of time to potentially become a champion in Bellator, defend the belt. Maybe he fights and dabbles in 2 weight classes, and then still could come to the UFC.
What's tough for him is, and this again, I just talked about him and AJ McKee. Those are the 2 names that have been mentioned in that kind of, will they leave at some point and go to the UFC? they both fight in the same division right now.
Yeah.
They're both featherweights. So it almost would benefit like Pico, because that's a tall task to try to ask Pico to take, to be either Pitbull or McKee. That's a tough fight for him either way.
Yeah.
So if McKee were to go to the UFC, then that kind of opens up the possibility, because I think outside of those two, I really think Aaron Pico has the skill set to beat anybody else in this division, and to his credit, give a good fight to those guys. It's just he's always going to be susceptible to the one punch, and so that's going to probably at times I worry that maybe he'll lose some fights that he should win, but we'll see. I think he's still improving a lot. Like you said, only 25 years old, high ceiling, but we'll see how far he can really go.
There you go.
UFC time. In our main event, saw Max Holloway win via unanimous decision over Yair Rodriguez. Odds makers, not even the odds makers, the betting public must have been shitting their pants during this fight, because they are the reason. They gave no faith. They had no confidence in Yair Rodriguez. They thought this guy was just going to, the moment he got hit with a few 1-2s, he was just going to turn over and turtle up. And little did they know that this man, what do they say? Viva Mexico, right? Isn't that what they say? This man had the heart of a Mexican fighter for sure. And he fought like the best fight I think I've ever seen from Yair Rodriguez.
Yes.
Even in a losing effort. This fight overall is in the fight of the year discussion. And I just want to say, before we even talk about the fight itself, really, what a run the UFC had this month.
Oh,
golly. I believe if you go back, even before UFC 267, I believe was the Paulo Costa Marvin Vettori card. So just look at the four biggest fights from those cards. You go Costa versus Vettori, and then UFC 267 had Jan versus Sandhagen. 268 had Chandler versus Gaethje, and then we get Holloway versus Rodriguez, which made...
And don't forget Billy Q and Shane.
Well, yeah, but I'm just...
I know.
You know, like, just saying overall that, like, what a month. And yes, other fights obviously throughout there that were fantastic as well. But just those might be people's fight of the year picks right there. Like, take your pick.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to say what a month it's been. It's probably been the best, my favorite month to have covered so far since we've been doing this podcast, just because the quality of the product we've been getting from the UFC has just been so high for the last month. And maybe the best month overall that I've seen quality-wise from the UFC since I started watching. If you go top to bottom for the last month, I mean, that's month of they really came to play.
Oh yeah.
But with that being said, this fight. Okay. Take a second. This fight was fantastic, but nobody came here expecting us to say anything different in that regard. So, Dominic, you being the Max Holloway fan, you wore the hoodie on Friday because you're a shill, and seeing the performance you saw, seeing the fight that you saw as a Max Holloway fan, I'm curious, not just your thoughts on the fight, but did the performances of both Holloway and Rodriguez live up to expectations? Was there anything that was a bit disappointing? Anything that exceeded expectations in terms of a performance basis?
Max did everything I expected him to do. I predicted a late round finish, which he was close a couple times, but overall, like the way he performed was everything I thought, except for his grappling. No, we got to see Max Holloway grapple for 2 rounds, and for what we got to see, it was pretty good. Granted, Yair is a striker, so he's not known for wrestling, but it's just a part of Max's game that you don't get to see very much. So I was glad we kind of got to see that, and some, jiu-jitsu transitions and being able to hold top position, land ground and pound, look for submissions, was looking for an arm triangle. And in terms of like over exceeding my expectations, Yair Rodriguez, man, the fact that he came in here after over 2 years off, gets launched in with Max Holloway, who's looking like an absolute killer following his win against Cater. and puts on a performance like this, I scored it 3-2 for Max. I had rounds 1 and 2 both go to Yair. His calf kicks were disgusting. I don't even know how Max could walk out of the octagon last night. His striking was so crisp, so powerful. Max's chin, again, is just insane. But so is Yair Rodriguez's chin. I mean, this was a performance, like Noah said, the best we've seen of Yair in a losing effort at that. And, what I saw looked like a guy that's still going to contend for a title one day because he looked so good. It didn't look like he missed a step. It looked like he got better. Maybe this 2-year layoff was in his benefit at the end of the day because he just looked lights out, man. But at the end of the day, it still wasn't enough to beat Max Holloway. Max is just such an elite talent. 19 wins now in the UFC at only 29 years old is just so insane. The Hall of Fame resume he already has stacked up is just crazy. And now it's like, okay, what are we going to do with him? I don't know. I guess I could ask you your thoughts more on the fight first before we get into what's next. I didn't want to steal any thunder.
Like you did with the Alaska Fighting Championship, you rat bastard.
Yes.
No, basically a lot of my thoughts are going to emulate yours there. Totally, Yair Rodriguez exceeding expectations. This is what we really need. He really needed this. Yeah. Yes, it's a loss, and he took a lot of punishment here. But to just get in there, have a full, complete performance, 5 rounds, it's a fight that's going to be up there for Fight of the Year talk. This is just what he needed. He's had a rough couple years, even if it looks like he's improved a lot.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned maybe it was good for him. And it could have been because, he had that war with Korean Zombie, maybe just taking a lot more time to recover. And then even the Jeremy Stevens fight, Jeremy gave him a good run for his money at times too. But I don't know if I would go that far to say that maybe it was good for him to have that layoff. But I do think it showed that he was still very committed to his training and committed to being a fighter.
Yeah.
Even while he was inactive. It's just been a rough time for him. Really, it's been a rough few years, not just the USADA violation where he didn't update his app. I think it's 3 times, and he got suspended for 6 months. All the failed bookings with Zabit Magomedsharipov. It's just he's had a really hard time to just get a fight booked, get your training camp together, show up to fight night, fight.
Yeah,
that's as simple as that sounds. He's just not been able to do that, whether it's been his fault or his opponent's fault. So for him to actually come in and do that here with Max Holloway was just a breath of fresh air. It really proved that he is a legit contender in his division. And yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment of he could very well be a champion in the future. Now, if I have to pick any holes here, I'm going to actually pick a hole for Max Holloway. Now, I do agree, exceeded expectations. Did not expect a lick of grappling.
Yeah,
Max landed some pretty good takedowns. He basically kind of baited Yair into throwing those leg kicks and then started timing him up very well with some nice double legs. But he kind of got lucky that he was getting those, if I'm going to be honest. I shouldn't say lucky. I mean, it took skill to get these takedowns. But if that fight would have just stayed standing the entire 5 rounds, I think Yair could have really pulled that one out because those leg kicks he were throwing were hurting Max bad. But once the grappling got brought into the equation, Yair started to fall behind a little bit, kind of had to start going more for broke, going more for the head a little bit, rather than continuing to beat up the leg. So that kind of got taken out of the later rounds, which is a credit to Max and his game plan. But where I'm going to say that this is a potential red flag for Max is, again, this has been it's always, you don't see it a lot. Like you look at a Calvin Kattar fight and a flawless performance he had there. But Max Holloway has always struggled with being a defensive fighter. He's a bit of a I'll take one to land one better type guy. And to his credit, it's nearly never failed him. But the bigger problem is those leg kicks. This is the reason basically the way he lost his title was the leg kicks of Alexander
100%.
Volkanovski. And this is why it's a red flag for me that we're still seeing it here. is if he wants to beat Alexander Volkanovski in a third fight, that's just he's not going to be able to take that for 5 rounds. And I don't see him necessarily being able to take down Volkanovski.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get 5 rounds where if Alexander really focuses on that, I mean, Max might be struggling to even walk on one of those legs towards the later rounds. It could really hinder his entire offense. Now, surprisingly, if I remember correctly, the second fight between the two, I don't remember Volkanovski really focusing on the leg kicks like he did in the first fight.
Nope.
Which is kind of interesting now that we've seen the fight where he won the belt, and then you look at this fight with Yair. So now this is going to kind of transition into what's next, and the obvious choice is to say you run it back a third time with Alexander Volkanovski, and all in all, that's probably what I would say I want to see most. But I think there's a bigger question here of if that's really what we're going to get next. These two likely could fight May. I was thinking like May, June.
Yeah.
You know, it's both of them coming off of wars. I want to give them some time, especially for a guy like Volkanovski, who is a long-standing champion at this point. And then for Max, who has put in more work than he even needed to show he was worthy of a title shot. So give him some time to recover before going back in there. I'm thinking like May or June. But around that time frame, Dominic, is when you'll start seeing guys like Conor McGregor returning. And there was a lot of, you know, what do you call them? A lot of feelers thrown out there from both sides. And it appears that this is becoming a real possibility potentially that maybe Conor McGregor's return bout would be at lightweight against Max Holloway. So I want you to give me what you think should happen next, but also what do you think will happen next based off what we saw this weekend?
I mean, what I think should happen is the title fight, right? That third fight with Volkanovski. It's like it's the highest, the two top guys, and then there's just a step below. It's Volkanovski and Max Holloway. So I definitely want to see that again. The problem arises, as you kind of mentioned on Friday, like if Max wins, then do we have to do it a fourth time? And then if he wins again, it's 2-2. Do we do it a fifth time? It's a whole saga at that point, a movie series. So, but yes, that's what I think should happen. And I said in our group chat last night, so I'm obviously not going to pivot from that. I think Conor and Max do fight. But I said it's a matter of when, not if. Because I don't necessarily think it is next for Max. I mean, by all means, it could be. It could be next for Max. I'm not saying it can't. But I don't know in my heart, in my head, if I think that's what will happen. I do think Max is going to get this title fight. Dana seems pretty big on making this third fight and just kind of putting it out there, getting it out of the way. But I do think we see Holloway McGregor. I think there's a lot of intrigue there. I've said it before where they first fought way back when they were both young pups in the UFC, and they both went on to accomplish so many amazing things. So to see it ran back years later, kind of like how Conor and Dustin Poirier did, would be very cool. But I think there's bigger fish to fry for Conor as well. Personally, if he comes back, I still want to see the trilogy with Nate. And there's a couple other names out there, obviously. I mean, Conor's just staying busy on Twitter while he's recovering. He's calling out fucking everybody in the whole world. Usman, Masvidal, Nate, Tony Ferguson, Holloway, Dustin Poirier. He has plenty of options, right? And so, yeah, that's overall what I think will happen. And for what it's worth, real quick, I do just want to say Yair and Brian Ortega, thank you very much. But I do want to get your thoughts as well.
God.
Well, I guess you kind of already said you think the title fight should happen, but
I do and I don't. It's just it depends on what we actually see, and this is hindsight. It's going to be a hindsight thing because while if they book the third fight, that's going to be perfectly acceptable, makes sense. I'm going to be excited for it. If you get another 5-round decision that's razor thin close, and Max Holloway does get it, then how can you deny Volkanovski a fourth fight?
I know.
But on the bright side, really the head-to-head record isn't really what's important. It's the statement. It's the matter of how you win. If Max went in there and were to knock out Volkanovski or finish Volkanovski or vice versa. That would really be the stamp on the rivalry and likely. And, of course, if Volkanovski won another close decision with Max, I think that would still
then it's just done. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of for Max, if he went in there and starched, finished, however you want to word it, Volkanovski, then I think you it's hard to really say that a rematch is warranted right there, despite the 2 wins previously. But I will admit that I don't know if I really see that happening from a third fight. I feel like there is a good chance that fight goes all 5 rounds again. And, not that it won't be a good fight. Both of their 2 previous bouts I enjoyed quite a bit, but maybe not going to be the fight that Volkanovski Ortega was or that Holloway Rodriguez was. And you're just going to find people being upset because of how close it is again. It's almost going to become a meme of itself at that point. It's just like these 2 guys are just so equal that they can't, it's just impossible to even continue running this. So I kind of like where Max's head is at. It's a surprising twist in this story where I figured he'd be completely focused on the title shot with Volkanovski, but instead he's kind of liking the idea of going for something that perhaps is bigger in the short term, a bigger payday, a bigger fight, but maybe less to do with his legacy. I mean, I guess in a way it is a legacy fight, but, he's not super focused right now on maybe all in on the title. It's, there's bigger things at play here. And I think a fight with him and Conor McGregor is fireworks. I think that's a great fight, especially considering some of the limitations we've seen from Max as a lightweight. He did not quite hold up as well against Dustin Poirier. And I think that's important to note because the majority of people are going to assume that Max is going to just run through Conor McGregor. And I just don't really see that being the case at lightweight. I think it's a much closer fight than people want to give it credit for. But it's also a very tough fight for Conor to come back to.
Yes.
So I think you kind of nailed it when you said it's a matter of when, not if. In all likelihood, the moment you think that it's all but done of Conor McGregor fight being booked, that's when it's like the furthest from even being completed. And then the fights that you assume are dead on arrival and have no chance of happening are the ones that end up getting put together. I didn't think there was a chance. I really thought him and Poirier, the second fight, was never going to happen.
Yeah, came out of nowhere.
They talked about doing the boxing. They talked about doing the boxing match in Ireland for charity, and Conor's just. It's hard. Like I mentioned previously, like Michael Chandler's tried to throw his name out there and stuff for Conor. With Conor, you never know because there's so much that goes into putting a fight on for that guy. He's bigger than the sport. So when you have a guy that has that amount of people around him, that he's essentially like a corporation in of itself, there's just a lot that goes into booking a fight for him. Yeah. It's not as simple as him saying yes. At least I don't think so.
Right.
Because he appears to say yes a lot, but then these fights don't really come to fruition. So if I had to guess, I think we do see Holloway Volkanovski 3. And I think we see Conor McGregor return and fight. I'll say Nate Diaz at welterweight. I don't know. I really don't know, though. For all I know, though, like I said, MMA moves so fast, it changes so much.
Yep.
Conor McGregor probably won't start to be real legitimate rumors or legitimate conversations about Conor's return fight for probably another 6 months.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
Think of how much is going to change between now and then,
Oh, yeah.
The whole sport's going to be different. That's the reality.
Yes.
Now let's talk about the co-main event. And this is interesting, Dominic, because we didn't even put this on our preview for Friday, but I thought it was worth giving it a little shout out here as a headline, and that was Marcos Rogerio de Lima and his TKO over Ben Rothwell, 32 seconds of the very first round. And part of the reason this is on here may not be for the fight itself, but I do want to just say the hand speed of de Lima is really good. I mean,
Yeah, for a
this
heavyweight.
guy was throwing bombs, and all respect to Ben Rothwell. The guy's had a great career, and this was the first time he had been knocked out since his 2009 loss to Cain Velasquez, funny enough.
Yeah.
But I don't know if De Lima necessarily has a high ceiling moving forward. I believe he's 36, and he's had all of his losses are at least to credible opponents. He fought at light heavyweight, I think, at one point in time, if my memory serves correct. But what I think is interesting about him, just to give him a shout out here, is his last fight with Maurice Green. He did a really good job of using his strength and power to overwhelm Green with the grappling. And then here you look at how explosive and fast he looked on the feet. Maybe this guy can make some noise in the back half of the top 15. It wouldn't surprise me because Ben Rothwell is a guy who I would assume can compete with anybody in that back half.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, at heavyweight, it's not too out of the realm of possibility to make noise, just because it is relatively shallow. I just thought it was funny you put this as a headline because I couldn't agree with it more. Blink and you'll miss it, because this is, in fact, what happened to me last night watching the card. Because the fight before it was Spencer and Letson, right?
Yep.
That was like the third fight. So that one ended, and they were doing like the commercials. They were doing some gaps between the fights, and my stream stopped on the TV, and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to rebuff it, and we'll get it back going again. Well, the ESPN app continued to not work for the rest of the evening following Spencer and Letson. So as I'm trying to get the TV to work, I'm seeing tweets saying, well, that was crazy, and about the stoppage and Herb Dean, and I'm like, no way that this fight happened already. It's two heavyweights. They're going to go the distance. It's going to be boring. I can't believe what happened. So I sprint, get my phone. I pull it up on my phone. De Lima's getting his hand raised, and the fight was over in 32 seconds. I quite literally missed this fight. So luckily there wasn't too much to catch up on. I got to see the highlights because that was basically the fight. But I just thought that was funny. That was your headline because that's what happened. But yeah, De Lima, man, to knock out kind of
I call
an
him a
OG.
legend.
A
Yeah,
legend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe OG is better. We do tend to throw the legend term around a lot, but definitely a guy that deserves our respect.
Yeah, and your stat there, where the first knockout Rothwell's had since Cain Velasquez back a decade ago,
yeah,
that's quite impressive, regardless of how wacky or not wacky the stoppage may have been. So shout out to De Lima, man. That was impressive.
And I guess I will just touch on the controversy behind the referee stoppage here. Herb Dean was the referee, and as prolific of a referee as Herb Dean is, he's literally like probably the biggest name since Big John McCarthy stopped doing it in terms of MMA refs. And this is just kind of another one in a string of weird incidents, whether, we necessarily think that he was judged fairly by it. But there is a growing sentiment within the public that Herb Dean is making a lot of mistakes. Yeah. I'm curious, when it came to this stoppage, did you feel that way? Did you, because we've been kind of a guy, like I remember when him and Dan Hardy had that spat. And I was actually one of the people that didn't really agree with Dan Hardy kind of going about it that way. But I was very much in a minority. And some people might even dislike this video and yell at us for me saying that. But I would appreciate it if you didn't. But I felt a little differently about it. I'll just put it that way. So we're not necessarily, and I'm not even sure exactly what you thought about even that. So I'm curious, once you saw the stoppage, how did you feel about it? How did you feel about Herb Dean's place there?
This stoppage reminded me exactly of how he treated Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Ribas. That's what this felt like to me, where he gets up on, he touches them, and he's like, nah, I'm not. I don't know. It's kind of just like a decisive thing for him, because Herb's one of the best in the game, and I don't give a shit what anybody says. And I couldn't imagine being a ref in these situations. I couldn't. It'd be hard as hell, because it's a split-second judgment, and that's it. You're altering someone's career by the decision you make as a referee when you're stopping fights. So personally, when I saw this, though, you got to consider this too. These are heavyweights. The damage from one shot is much more detrimental than other weight classes. So when I saw Rothwell's leg buckle and his body just kind of go limp for a second, and then he ends up toppling over, I was okay with it. But like Herb, just do it. Like pull DeLima off. He grabbed him and then kind of let him go again and hit again and then pulled him. So just if that's your instant gut reaction is I got to do it, then pull his ass off. That's it. I'm fine with that being the stoppage. It looked like a knockout on his feet to me is what it looked like. Same with Marina and Amanda that I'm comparing it to, where we've said multiple times on this show, Amanda got knocked out twice in that fight because she got hit bad on the feet, wobbled, was basically out. Herb he touched him, was going to stop it, but then decided not to. Then Amanda takes more damage than what she probably should have taken, and then he ended the fight. So, again, a great referee, but it's split-second decisions they have to make. And this one, I wish he would have just pulled him immediately like he wanted to do. I don't really know what kept him from pulling the trigger, but that's just what it comes down to, is pulling the trigger, in fact.
Well, it's just weird with Herb Dean because you look at the history of different referees. Every good referee has had a mistake or two.
Yeah.
Big John McCarthy, any of them. And then you have guys like, why am I blanking on our boy? Like the worst referee of all time.
Mazzagatti?
Yeah, Steve Mazzagatti, who essentially made a mistake every fight he called, it seemed like. Then you have like Mario Yamasaki, who was pretty beloved, and then all of a sudden, he had a he just kind of fell off and got a lot worse as he got older. So we've seen it all. And then today, I feel like usually we have a lot of really good referees. I mean, UFC 267 had that guy, but that was an interesting one. But
yeah,
overall, a lot of quality there. But with Herb Dean, who is supposed to be kind of the leader of this group, the best of the best, he seems to be lacking the kind of confidence in his decision-making to fully commit to the decision he is making. Let's be clear. Stopping that fight when he stopped it was the right call. He just almost didn't make it. Like he made the call, almost backed off of it because Rothwell was going for a takedown. And then when DeLima just stopped and looked at him, Herb's like, well, shit, I guess I did touch him. Well,
yeah,
it's over. So basically in this situation, I think nothing bad came of it. I mean, nothing, because DeLima didn't even hit Rothwell again.
Yeah.
Literally, Rothwell went for the double leg, and DeLima kind of stopped because Herb grabbed him. Rothwell kind of fell on his side and took DeLima down with him. And again, DeLima didn't throw another punch, so good on him for not doing that. And he just looked at Herb, and it was fight over. So Rothwell didn't take any extra damage here. It was just, this is just a situation where a ref just needs to be more confident in their decision making in the moment. Doesn't matter if it's Herb Dean or anybody else reffing that fight. You just don't want these kind of instances where if you're going to stop it, like where you come in, you touch both guys to separate them, then you can't, I don't know. It's just, you're already made the decision at that point.
Yeah. So
if he had just let it keep going, if DeLima didn't stop and it just kept going, it would have been worse. So thankfully, DeLima kind of helped Herb, spared him a little bit more, I guess, punishment from the online community. But I'm glad Dana at least did say something. It seems Herb is as good as he is most of the time. It seems like he's gotten to this place almost where he was above criticism. Even the UFC wouldn't really, Dana really would never criticize him. Even with the Dan Hardy incident, if you remember, he said, if any of my employees yell at a ref, they will be fired.
Yeah.
But I was glad to see that he at least said, Herb needs to make that call. You just got to make it or don't make it, but decide,
Right. Exactly.
So I don't think there's much of a controversy on this one, but it's more so due to the fighter that actually stopped. So shout out to DeLima there too.
Yeah.
Let's get into the rest. Well, Dominic, it's not just UFC fights this time to talk about the rest, and not even just another Bellator fight. We actually start with another promotion. I had the distinct pleasure of watching Combate Global's 8-man lightweight tournament that they held on Paramount Plus Friday night. And it was a one-night tournament, so you would fight up to 3 times. And the reason why I wanted to put this out here, because it was a good card. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was billed as USA versus Mexico, which is a little interesting considering that this was a card meant to celebrate the 28th. Is it it's technically not the 28th anniversary because it's 28 years since the very first UFC event. It's like the 27th anniversary, but you know what I mean?
It's all hero there.
The 28 years ago from Friday was the very first UFC event, and the CEO of Combate Global is Campbell McLaren, who's one of the original founders of the UFC. So this one-night tournament, paying homage to that format that the UFC used to have. And might I just say what a breath of fresh air it was to actually have like a one-night tournament. I didn't even know that was even possible to get sanctioned anymore. Right. But they did have to do a little bit of workaround, I guess, with the first 2 fights, I guess, rounds of the tournament was 1 5-minute round, and then your finale being a 3 5-minute rounds. So because of that, certain fights you kind of wanted to see go a little longer. And then, of course, you did have some that got finished in that first round. But there's really one reason why we wanted to talk about this. That's because, Dominic, one of our combatants representing the US of A comes from no other than Carlisle, Ohio. That's right. A city that for most of you be like, huh? Where is that?
What?
But this is a gentleman we went to high school with. Jimmy Sandlin was on this card. And, he was a pretty good wrestler back in the day from what I remember. So it's really cool to see that he's not just embarking on this MMA career, but that he's actually moving up, that he's actually taking big fights and promotions that are pretty good. Combate Global, no slouch of a promotion at all. And while he did come up short, I just wanted to tell him, like, all the respect in the world for, going over there and being able to compete at a high level on this card. And I look forward to seeing what's next for him if he happens to find himself on another card that is, accessible to this level like a Combate, then I would happily watch again just for that reason. And it was nice to see some of the members of our Carlisle community back home on Facebook. I saw a lot of people sharing the fight information, so that was always nice to see. Dominic, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, shout out to Jimmy again. And, this was his second time being in Combate Global. He took a short notice fight there not too long ago, had a really good performance. It was a close decision victory, so much so they brought him back here for the tournament. So shout out to you, Jimmy, the beast of a wrestler. I remember watching him in high school thinking, holy shit. And now he's doing it big with MMA. So, it's awesome to see our small town on a global scale, Noah.
Yeah, and ultimately Enrique Gonzalez, representing the US of A, did get the win over Christian Perez, representing Mexico. Kind of interesting, USA versus Mexico. Not really, don't get me wrong, there's a storied history of USA versus Mexico in combat sports, but in terms of MMA, not exactly the two nations that I would pick to kind of represent the history, you know what I mean?
Right.
But now we'll get into 271. We have one fight for the rest on there. That was Roman Faraldo with his flying knee knockout of Robert Turnquist in round 1, a minute 17 in. Dominic, do you have a chance to check this one out?
Oh, I had a chance, Noah, and this is going to be in the knockout of the year category at the Joey's, or at least it might be once we discuss what's going to be the nominees, because this was pure savagery. He lands a big hook that wobbles his opponent there, this being Faraldo that got the knockout, points at him, did a little Nate Diaz style point. Think of when he pointed at Leon Edwards, except Nate didn't capitalize on that opportunity. But here Roman definitely did. Points at his opponent, knew that the fight was over, and bam, lands a flying knee. Beautiful knockout. Sports Center covered it. ESPN covered it, so it's a big deal. And that it came in Bellator. Good for them. Good on him, by the way. Roman Faraldo, what a vicious knockout.
Yeah, it's a tough year. Knockout of the year is very stacked this year. So as it seems to be every year, but you never know. It was, as I described it, the man went from Nate Diaz to Jorge Masvidal in a matter of seconds. He pointed at him, then ran and knocked his ass out with a flying knee. So very impressive indeed.
Yes.
On the UFC end of things, we do have a lot more to talk about, and that starts with pretty high-profile bout we were excited for. But Chaos Williams adds another one to his highlight reel with a knockout of Miguel Baeza, a minute 2 seconds of round number 3. I think it's time for a step up in competition for Chaos Williams. What do you think?
I agree with you, 100%. And this is just another, highlight reel to his finishes here in the UFC. I think he's 4-1 now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's either 3-1 or 4-1, I think.
Yeah, and to do this to Miguel Baeza, because we said it on Friday how much of a believer we are in him, says a lot. A very back and forth, fun fight, and then Chaos, man. At the end of the day, he has that power, and while he is much more technical sound now, he's fighting a lot more patient. When he explodes, it's dangerous, and that's exactly what happened here. The combination was brutal.
Yeah, this performance was very clear that he has taken seriously that route of patience, and he showed that in his previous bout where he lost to Michel Pereira, but he didn't look like he had really fine-tuned that style. He looked a little almost uncomfortable fighting at a slower pace. Here, though, even though he might have slowed his game down, he still carried that explosiveness and probably carried it better because of his patience into the later rounds and ultimately being able to get the knockout finish. For Miguel Baez, I do just want to say, still a big believer in this guy. It's back-to-back losses. It's a tough way to go for this year. He even put on his own Twitter account what a humbling year this has been. And I could really sense the disappointment through the post. But, head up, chin up, Miguel Baeza. I mean, he's going to, it's back to the drawing board for sure, but he's still so young and so talented that this shouldn't set him back too much. You're going up against another very highly touted prospect. And while I thought Baeza would have the more well-rounded skill set, I do still, a part of me still believe that maybe long-term Baeza still has the higher ceiling of the two, even though Chaos Williams ultimately does get the victory here. And I'm excited to see what's next for both gentlemen.
Oh, yeah.
Following that, Song Yadong gets his, Dominic, 7th win inside the octagon at the age of 23.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was. And he got the TKO over Julio Arce, a minute 35, round number 2. Did this fight go how you thought it would?
It didn't, but this is what we needed to see from Song Yadong. I think that's pretty clear here to go out there and make a statement like this against a veteran too, and Julio Arce. And like you said, 7 wins at only 23 years old. He's 7-1-1 in the UFC, and he's been in there with good competition. But there was no. He's definitely has some finishes. Don't get me wrong, but just that one performance that was just like real convincing, and that he felt like you needed to see it, and this is what it felt like here. He gets this big TKO victory over Arce, and again, it's what he needed. I think it says a lot about his potential. Only 23 years old, from the Asian market as well. So this is someone that the UFC is going to back pretty heavily. And in terms of matchmaking, I'm excited to see what they do in his near future as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is his record's very nice, and before this bout he would have been 6-1-1. But
yeah,
the problem is that these razor thin close decisions he'd been in, he could have easily been 4-3-1.
Yep.
So the room for error was growing thinner and thinner. This is the performance I wanted to see from Song Yadong against a good opponent in Arce, an opponent that I will mention I picked in this bout. I picked the underdog here, and I thought Arce might have brought a sort of veteran quality to this fight that Yadong may not be able to match. Yadong's always shown to be a pretty high fight IQ fighter for being so young. He does have a lot of experience, but just, again, a guy that seems, maybe due to his youth, is a bit at times he had shown to be a little hesitant to really commit, to really put himself at risk. He seemed to be a bit risk averse, and while that can be a style that works well, GSP did that beautifully for years. I needed to see more, just a more one-sided performance, more of a showcase of your talent rather than just holding on for a win or, just barely beating your opponent. And here beats Arce pretty soundly. And it's a good win. He is, I believe, ranked number 15 in the bantamweight division, so should be looking ahead. And there's a lot of really fun fights in that bantamweight division. No easy fights ahead, but I like what I'm seeing from Song Yudong after this. And also, you're right, the Chinese market behind him and the UFC are really liking that market right now, really trying to push that market. So he's going to quickly become a favorite of the UFC, I imagine.
Undoubtedly.
Andrea Lee gets the TKO over Cynthia Calvillo. This was stopped. The corner stopped it, I believe. Calvillo said she was done at the end of round 2. We do have to give a shout out to one of our viewers commented on the preview episode and give a very in-depth analysis of Andrea Lee's abilities and ultimately why he felt that Andrea Lee would be able to get this one over Cynthia Calvillo. And a lot of what he said kind of rung true here. But what did you see from this fight, Dominic?
I mean, this is back-to-back performances now where Andrea Lee has kind of taken that next step. She looks like she's in that best portion of her career right now, coming into her all, putting all of the skills together. Her striking, we know, is always good. She showed off the grappling against Shevchenko, and she really just outclassed Calvillo on the feet here in this one. She was able to stuff the takedown attempts, piece her up for the first 2 rounds, so much so that the corner stops the bout for Calvillo, as Noah said. And, I don't hate the stoppage. I was surprised, but at the same time, I don't hate it. I respect it. You don't see it often in the game, but if your fighter is just out of it and they're taking this damage, kind of protect them, I guess is the way to put it. And Andrea Lee gets a legitimate TKO victory here. She did what she had to do, and all of a sudden, Noah, she's going to be launched into the top 10 here. Very exciting times for Andrea Lee.
Yeah, she's had some tough losses already, so that'll probably hold her back in the immediate future in terms of, what kind of matchup she might get. Like, I don't really see her, let's say she jumps into number 5. That's what Calvillo was in this fight. So if she takes her spot at number 5, I don't really foresee her being given a fight with any of the top 4. I think she'll likely still be fighting probably someone in that back half of the top 10 or even 11 through 15, just because, she does have the 3 losses that were previously on her record. So it was a good win, a really good performance. For Cynthia Calvillo, man, it's tough. This is a tough one for sure. She didn't really show much here, and that's kind of been the case for a while, dare I say, for her. This is a woman that at one point early on in her UFC career, Dana White was comparing to Ronda Rousey. And, that's dangerous to do that, but she did show a lot of promise early on, and we're just not seeing that with her as a women's flyweight. She struggled to make strawweight, so then she moved up, and she just isn't the same fighter here. It just seems she doesn't what she was good at 115 pounds. She doesn't hold those same advantages at 125 pounds, and to her credit, though, Andrea Lee, I just think has shown a lot of improvement, and that should not be looked over here for sure.
Yes.
Sean Woodson gets the TKO in the first round over Colin Anglin. 4 minutes, 30 seconds around number 1. Sean Woodson from the Contender Series, Dominic. And fun fact, there was a picture going around after because this guy is huge for this featherweight division.
Yeah.
He is 6'2", obviously 145 pounds on weigh-in day. But this man has fought previously at 215 pounds, if the picture going around is to be believed. And you know what? He kind of fights like he's got that much of a mismatch going on as well, because this guy, I am so excited about what this guy can do. If he can keep a fight standing, his boxing is just so crisp.
Oh, man.
The body work and mixing in with the headshots. Colin Anglin, more of the wrestler here, but chose to keep it standing. It's a bold move, Cotton, and that proved to be fatal here because he just couldn't withstand. It was the body shot that ended the fight, which always is impressive. If you can end up, if you have the power to put away someone with a body shot, that usually shows like, okay, this guy's got some power. So I love the size. I love the reach advantage he's going to hold over most of his opponents. I will be interested to see once he goes up against more grapple-heavy featherweights, if he's going to have some weaknesses with staying off his back or what kind of guard is he going to have? We'll see. But for now, I'm very excited about what we might get with Sean Woodson.
Oh yeah, I mean he's a guy that's like been on my radar. I've seen his fights in the UFC, but this was his first finish win. He's 3-1 now, but he needed that one win, kind of like how Song Yudong. We just wanted to see that one win, and this is what it felt like for Sean Woodson too. And his boxing, as Noah said, is so crisp and technical. His build is so unique for the featherweight division. Very much excited to see how they go about kind of putting him up with other guys getting into that top 15 area of the featherweight division.
Mm-hmm. Before that, Rafael Alves gets the first round submission over Mark Jacasey, a minute 48 seconds of round number 1. Now, Jacasey being the more known product here, Dominic, we've been following Jacasey for quite a while, but Rafael Alves showing that even though his record ain't the cleanest, he can't be counted out. What did you like about this one?
Yeah, this was Rafael Alves' first win in the UFC, so shout out to you there. And I got to say, a nut shot in the first 5 seconds of the fight, that's a first. This was very quick, and it was a bad one. But for what it's worth, they recover. It was basically like they just restarted the fight. But Alves, man, very powerful and explosive. That's what I took from this. He landed a flying knee, too, if I'm not mistaken. Casey kind of ate it, but was taking shots, immediately transitioned to the back, gets the submission. I think it was it a rear naked or a guillotine?
No, I believe he landed the flying knee and it went into a guillotine.
Right. That's what it was. But hey, regardless of how it happened, very impressive here. And again, Alves' first UFC win came in a big way.
Agreed. And then our opening bout, Da Un Jung getting the first round knockout over Kennedy in Chekwu. Dominic probably still doesn't know how to spell this man's name, but this man was putting the whole alphabet in this guy's last name on Twitter. I was like, oh my God. I said, this guy's just put Kennedy, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. But it happens in 3 minutes, 4 seconds. Dominic, did anything seem off with Kennedy in this performance? Because as much as I want to say, I do want to, maybe I should start with, I love Da Un Jung, and I think this guy is proving that he is very underrated. That's 15 wins in a row. And to do it in this fashion, he showed some very powerful shots, was able to land through the guard.
Elbows.
Yeah, for sure. And to do it against a guy like Kennedy, who always has that reach advantage. And, usually if you're fighting a stand-up fight with that guy, you're fighting from behind. And here he showed no problems. I kind of just ran through him. But I do just want to ask, did you notice did anything seem off with Kennedy in this one?
You know what? It's weird because Kennedy kind of is hesitant in the opening rounds of his fights. That's been like to his detriment, and we've seen he'll come on strong. He'll get the third round finishes and look great, but the first round he just doesn't come out ready to go. And you against a guy like Da Un Jung specifically, you can't do that. This is a guy that finishes fights just as much. And shout out to Da Un before you give your thoughts on Kennedy. Like you said, the elbows and just he was so patient, but when he landed, it was so powerful, and you could just tell there was an impact with every shot. So very impressive performance.
Yeah, I just saw that going around Twitter about Kennedy's performance. And truthfully, I think if you really go back and watch this guy's fights, he usually weathers a storm, and then he just comes on late. And that's been kind of my concern with him as a legitimate prospect. And that's why I actually sided with Jung in this contest, just more consistency over a 3-round bout. And here you didn't have to see it in rounds 2 and 3, but I love what I'm seeing with Da Un Jung. Give my man top 15.
Yes.
He's ready for it. He probably should have already been fighting top 15. I believe he's undefeated in the UFC outside of a draw with Sam Alvey, which, obviously that one hasn't aged super well. But Sam Alvey, always a game opponent. So give my man top 15. Actually, I'll even give a name for you, Dominic. It's not. I can't take credit for it. I believe I saw someone was matchmaking the winners. I thought it might have been Brett Okamoto. Ryan Spann. I like that fight.
I love when we do a couple matchmaking in the rest. It just gets me all excited.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, as this kind of wraps up our weekend recap, this was a fantastic card. I don't want to. Bellator 271 was good as well. There was some good action on that. And, I got to watch Combate, and that was fun. And obviously Alaska Fighting Championship. I want a shirt. I want an AFC shirt. AFC.
Come on over, AFC.
Come on now.
Fly us out to Alaska. We'll cover an event.
I will literally be the AFC guy.
Yeah,
Like,
let's do it.
I'm gonna be the first guy to ask questions at the AFC press conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's snowing here in Ohio. We might as well go to Alaska and watch some fights.
Regardless, this was a great weekend, but I do just want to focus on the UFC's card because this was a card that a lot of people were, we were kind of brought back down to earth. We had the back-to-back pay-per-views that were stacked. So while the main event, Max Holloway being a part of it, had a lot of people excited, the rest of the card was looking like we knew there was some diamonds in the rough, some fun fights on here, but even I don't think we expected what we ended up getting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just right now is such an opportune time. If you guys are for, one of these listeners or viewers of our show that don't really watch MMA that much, now is a perfect time to really indulge yourself and get involved, because I promise the majority of these cards, no matter what you might hear on Twitter or even what we've said, where on paper sometimes the name value is not there, these fights are delivering every week, even some cards that look so bad. And like next Saturday's card, I still think has I think it's on an equal playing field to that of Holloway Rodriguez. The only thing that it's missing is a main event that is intriguing to me. That's Holloway Rodriguez, but Ketlen Vieira, Miesha Tate should be a fun fight.
Yes.
And the people's main event, Michael Chiesa versus Sean Brady, that's going to be a banger. And along with some other good fights on there as well. So I highly recommend for anybody who's on the fence or, it's just with these weekly fight nights, maybe if there's not someone on the card, you don't feel like watching, just take the leap. Just give it a chance. Really sit down and watch these fights, and you're going to have a good Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Noah did back in 2016, and look at him now. A fucking just content creating MMA genius is what I'm partnered with here, Noah Baker. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And there's no better way to just keep track of it than by being with the Joeys every week, baby. 2 to 3 episodes a week. Come on down.
All right, Bob Barker. Let's but yeah, that's going to wrap it up for our MMA Weekend Recap. Give us your thoughts on any of these fights that we talked about. Give us your thoughts on Alaska Fighting Championship. Please let me know about the history of that promotion. I want to know more.
Yes.
But you can leave us a voice message. We'll tell you how to do that here in a second. But we'd like to get more of that. You heard Tyler's lovely voice a couple weeks ago. So the more, the better when it comes to that. But until then, we will be back on Friday. Should mention that. Ketlen Vieira versus Miesha Tate. There's no Bellator, so
no.
I think that's all right. I think that's our only card going in. So
Yeah.
Should be fun. But Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me, Twitter, Instagram, at DSLE14. More important, go follow, go engage, go interact with the podcast on social media, Twitter and Instagram, to be specific, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
For me, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at ntbaker_. If you go to my bio, there is a link that will take you to the link tree that will present you with a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with the social media platforms. So that includes...
It's not limited to, though.
Well, it kind of is.
Oh.
The Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor. First one being leaving a voice message, like I just mentioned. Go to that Linktree link. Click on it. You can leave up to 60 seconds. Any questions you want answered, any thoughts you have and want to share, we will present them, and we'll give our thoughts on them. And then, so you could really you could basically, by that, we are kind of opening a loophole. Someone could force their way into being like a third host. Like
Basically.
if someone submitted a question or thought every episode, they would essentially force their way into being part of the show.
Yes.
We can't do anything about it.
No, we can't. We can't help it.
So bring it, bitch. But anyways, the second link If you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, it's quite easy to do so. You just go to that link and you give us a few dollars a month, and all that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast. But that's it. We're out. And we're going to see y'all bitches on Friday.